The immortal John Hancock here, and today I'd like to talk about the ever-changing state of retro gaming and collecting. And so I just wanted to share kind of my backstory. Of a lot of people ask, how did you get what you've got, and just kind of your backstory. A lot of people don't know it, so I just thought I'd have an informal conversation about my involvement with retro gaming and where I see it going, in my opinion. So I started collecting retro video games, probably around when I was a teenager. And so, you know, I've been playing video games since the age of 4 or 5. But I really started collecting when when I was mowing lawns and earning my own allowance. And so I did buy my first console I bought was a Sega Genesis. But that was modern gaming back then, and so really my first retro gaming, my first buying something that wasn't new, was really stuff like this, and that was when Atari re-released the 2600 and re-released several games, and that's when I got excited and started collecting retro games, and back then, and that was late 80s is when Atari was really pushing re-releasing the Atari 2600 Junior, and that's when I got excited about playing Atari. That's really playing some classics back then, and going to yard sales and finding some old Atari games like that. That was just a great time. I didn't care about value. I had some dollars in my pocket, and I was able to buy a console and games, and people were just happy to have find a kid that was willing to just game. My first TV I gamed on was black and white. So that was the state back then. This is in the late 80s, and there wasn't businesses everywhere. It was old games, and everybody was focused on the new technology versus the old. Fast forward to the 90s, and in the 90s there started to be a shift, but a lot of rental stores were going out of business. I then had a car. I was just got out of high school in the mid 90s, and I really started able to add to my collection, and it still wasn't a huge business. The rental store business was starting to falter by then, and that's where I got some great parts of my N64 collection. Is when pretty much I hit and my Genesis and Nintendo, and so that's really a different time. When really the big collectors were collecting Atari and Nintendo, with the focus on Atari still, and it was just different. I got a lot in my collection very cheap, and when it wasn't mainstream. And I'm not rich. I know that my collection is worth probably quite a bit now, but that wasn't my focus. I was just excited to collect and to game. There was definitely more of a focus on just in-person community back then, and the shows represented that. The retro game shows were a lot smaller, and so at the time in the 90s, I know there was a World of Atari, I think in 1999. I wasn't part of any communities retro game events at that time. I was doing it on my own. And I had friends that supported it, but there wasn't really, and I had, I would play video games at my apartment and have some tournaments and stuff, but that was it. There wasn't any big, conventions at the time. Early 2000s, there was a really big shift to Nintendo, and that's when a lot of things started to change. The shows changed, their shift changes. It was kind of the early 2000s. You saw kind of the end of the Classic Gaming Expo, and really the Atari collectors became a minority to Nintendo, and that's when I think that the business side started to take off for better or worse. I think the business side fuels retro gaming, but it only works if it's affordable, right? And you can find product. And so eBay, while eBay hit its stride early 2000s, you could still find deals, but it was the beginning of people starting to use eBay to price their stuff at yard sales, and that wasn't the beginning of the end, but it just made things differently at, finding stuff. By 2005, I'd say 2005 marked kind of where I feel retro gaming kind of hit its first popularity spike, and where the mainstream kind of knew what that was. And it's still niche. It's still, I mean, it's way more mainstream than it ever has been now. But back in 2005, before YouTube was huge, it was just, I don't know, it was just a lot different. By 2010, there was a significant spike in prices, which I know people complain a lot about prices, and eventually it'll affect retro gaming. But by 2010, I feel that retro gaming, including YouTube, really had popularized this hobby, which is great. I think the downside is that some people thought that it kind of ruined the community sense of things. I don't know. For me, it changed a lot. About 2011 is when I stepped down as a board member of Portland Retro Gaming Expo for a lot of different reasons. The main reason being time, being too busy. I was pulling 2 jobs. I wanted to do a smaller charity event, and really what really kind of hit at that time, what I noticed is that there was a lot of people in this hobby for different reasons. And there's a lot of people that make a living off selling retro games. They work hard. They work more hours than I ever want to work. The people putting on these large conventions, I mean, they don't get paid to do it. It's kind of like working really hard to put on a show for somebody else to have fun. And my hat's off to those people. And it just it really exploded into mainstream, and it just changed everything. It did. And now, fast forward to 2017, I think that we're on a cusp of a different change, and I want to talk about that. I think first of all, high prices don't affect just the consumer. They also affect the businesses trying to sell these products. If prices are too high, nobody buys, and if nobody buys, then that business goes away. And so prices right now are really high, and it affects what people are buying. I don't blame them. It affects what I'm buying. I mean, I can't believe people always email me, hey, what's the price on such and such, and I'm not a walking price guide, and so I tell people, well, have you searched completed eBay items, auction items? And so that's going to be my response if you ask me on price, by the way. And so they're high. I mean, they're very high, and so it affects people what they buy. And I think that there's fierce competition. There's game stores searching farther and farther for product just to survive. And it's tough. Nintendo's still pretty popular, when you go to conventions and stuff, which now are everywhere. That's the other thing about now, is that conventions are everywhere. There's more people, I think, now sharing their collection with social media and stuff, and I think that's awesome. The con is how many people out there are playing their stuff that they collect, and I'm trying to take a reflection upon that to myself. For me, I want to use my collection as kind of like a social media museum. It may be years before I get an actual museum, and so I want to take this opportunity to kind of share what I have on social media. Maybe go for the less mainstream stuff. I think the craze of Nintendo will die down because I think Nintendo is not the center of the universe anymore. Moving forward, retro gaming is going to still be around. It's not going to die. It's going to change. The business aspect definitely, when it's harder to find product to sell, or when product is so expensive nobody wants to pay for it. That's going to change prices. It's not going to crash. I don't think retro gaming is going to crash. It's going to look different. Good example is the NES Mini. The NES Mini is a good example where I see products like that in the future. Retro gaming that you can say that you own, but that you can just you can put it on a shelf, but you can also play it. I have my NES Mini hooked up to my main TV, and I play on it. It's awesome. Retro gaming. So that's the collecting aspect. The gaming aspect, you have so many devices now that can play, emulate old games for free. I think with the high prices of games, I think emulation and ROMs, gathering games that way just to play, have gotten more popular. What also has gotten more popular too is people on social media kind of bragging about what they have, and it's part of it. I don't feel like I've ever bragged about something. Definitely, gloating, I guess, would be another word for it. But it happens. It happens. I'm always proud of what I've collected. People work hard to collect, especially in these days. There's a portion of people that are with deep pockets that are collecting and showcasing what they have that haven't collected for a long time. And it is what it is. I think we as a gaming community need to just come together better and celebrate victories or collections, and not nitpick how someone got something as much. And so it's hard to do. We're kind of at a fractured state right now. I did other video about that. But I just want us to come together as a gaming community. I think there's some wonderful people from around the world that just love video games. So the other thing about the current state of games, I think PlayStation is going to become more popular. There are some questions moving forward about how collectability is going to be changed. I think that the hardware failure is going to continue to be a concern. More and more games are not going to work as well, especially cartridges. They're not, it wasn't ever intended to say, this is going to last 50 years. So, Atari's hitting its 40th anniversary this year. Eventually, some of the games are going to stop working. You're starting to see a couple Nintendo games now, here and there, not working as well. It happens. It happens. It's going to happen more and more. And so that's, for people that don't play, just that want to collect, that's not going to be an issue. For people that, want to resell and stuff, you better start testing your stuff, because it's becoming more and more of an issue. I've seen more and more stuff fail, and that's because I've tested it. It's not an issue yet. The other issue is disc rot. There's reports that more and more, especially like Saturn and Sega CD stuff, is starting to appear. Even games that are brand new that don't have a blemish are starting not to play correctly. And so disc rot is a concern moving forward for people that care. I think that the current retro gaming state is going to move towards more dedicated game consoles that play on modern TVs, that have the ability to play off an SD card slot or something else. It's kind of a marriage of both. Modern takes on retro consoles that play on modern TVs, I definitely see that as something very popular moving forward. It's a long video, I know. What do you think? What do you see retro gaming and collecting moving towards? And I know they're two different things. I know that retro gaming you know, for many people is playing on an emulator, and I don't blame people doing that. That's not collecting, but that's great gaming, you know. And the RetroPie, playing on a computer with a controller, that's gaming bliss, and you know, for many people that's good enough. For me, you know, I like the historical aspect of it. I don't think I would have my channel if I just showed, you know, the gameplay footage and nothing else. That's one thing that I feel like I can bring to the table, is like I have so many physical copies of games. I want to show more of that. I want to show more of, you know, the vintage hardware, because sometimes that's lost when a ROM's just played, and that's what I feel like my channel can contribute to the community. Because if I feel like I can't contribute to the community, I'm not going to do this YouTube channel. So thank you so much for all the supporters that have said so many wonderful things to me, the comments in my videos. I do 2 videos a week, one on Thursdays and one on Sundays. I do have a Patreon. I do take donations through that. You know, a lot of people think, you know, with my YouTube channel, I'm making hundreds of dollars. I'm making a couple $100s a month currently, and that's you know, that pays for some of the items that I showcase in a video, or you know, but you know, people that do YouTube typically don't live on it, and it's very difficult. And so I just want to say to all the people doing YouTube channels, my close friends, thank you so much for the support and the advice and the encouragement. I'll see you next week. You take care.